workshop meeting tonight. Anyone who has a public comment, please state your name, your address, and proceed.
My name is Steve Hansen. I live at 103 Wilshire Circle. And I guess I came because I had concerns on your parking ordinance, off-street parking ordinance that you're considering. I have a couple issues, I guess. I got a lot of drivers in my household, and for instance, this past winter I had a car parked in my yard various times. And I guess I didn't see an issue with it. I guess I don't know that my neighbors complained. I also have a 30-foot RV that's been parked in my yard for over 10 years. And once again, I guess I don't know if your ordinance is going to include that also, I guess, in the rules. I used to work in the RV industry, and I know I used to get a lot of trade information specifically on RV parking ordinances and things like that. And I guess I'd like to just share a little bit about that. A lot of cities struggle with that, and in many cases they try to solve one problem and it ends up blowing up in their face. Because nationally you'll find just counting RVs, like travel trailers, motorhomes, there's usually 1 in 12 households owns one. And a lot of cities, when they've passed an ordinance doing that, they either have access issues or they run into where the heck are people going to store this. The other thing that can come up is a lot of people then will say, okay, I can't park my RV, but this person can park their boat, and this person can park their utility trailer that they're hauling a lawnmower, their leaves, and suddenly, do all of those trailers and other things suddenly become an issue also for regulation, I guess. Personally, I guess if you do this and I have to start pouring concrete, I guess it's money that I don't want to spend, so I guess I just want to share that.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? Okay, thank you, Steve. Anyone else? All right, we will start then with the agenda and turn it over to Ron Dunn.
Thank you, Mayor. We've topic of deer management program considerations been brought up in the past recently to talk about whether or not the City Council should consider looking into establishing a deer management program similar to what Iowa Falls does and some other communities do. We've had issues with deer damaging trees, newly planted trees in cemetery and parks, and so we're just bringing it up for discussion and see what kind of direction council wants to go, if any. So open for discussion.
We're covering some of that with the new trees, right?
We're protecting the new trees that are being planted for the city. The tree board has started that, and I think that any new trees that are going to go in the cemetery will probably be protected also. It's quite an investment, but some of the trees are already there. I don't know that there's a plan to protect those. The damage that's done to them is twofold. One is just bucks rubbing on trees, but then there's also browsing that can bother the trees also. And there are quite a lot of deer that do browse and graze east of the cemetery and on the north end of town, in the Herman Park area. There's a lot of traffic there.
What does Iowa Falls do?
I don't have a copy of their ordinance. I don't really know. Do you know, Doug? They have a certain time frame. We can look into that.
I think they've worked a little bit with the DNR to establish their program. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know there's kind of a lottery situation, and then you always have to identify areas and different things. So I think there's a lot of steps. I think what I'd recommend to do if you guys decide you want to move forward, I think we need to talk to us, because I think each community is probably unique in and of itself. You know, Iowa Falls has a major river running through their community, and I think you probably have deer that, you know, reside right inside the city limits, where I think we may have a few that reside, but I think we also pull a lot from the county in our areas as well. So I honestly don't know. I think we just need to, you know, contact them for some advice and see what they have, because really the deer management's gonna have to go through them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something you wanna pursue, we could invite a DNR specialist to come.
Yes, I'd like to.
I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Okay,
I think Doug's right, they have in Iowa Falls gone by lottery systems. And it's not where you just shoot from your back porch. They had areas that were identified, if you won the lottery for that particular area. And it was on the edge of town. This isn't something that's right in the middle of town. And the folks that did participate, it's archery only, and they have to show proficiency in order to be involved in the program at all.
okay, we'll do that. Next, should we move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Next item, we had talked about ordinance 350 that amends chapter 149 wellhead protection at a previous meeting, and I told you I'd get you more information regarding the wellhead protection, or the wellhead capture zones that we, the Iowa Rural Water Association proposed that we change those from 2-year, 10-year, and 20-year to 2-year, 5-year, and 10-year. And this handout that they gave you, I'm just going to go through a few highlights of it. The wellhead protection area was were delineated for 3 different time of travel scenarios: 2-year, 10-year, and 20-year capture zones. Natural groundwater flow directions are an important factor in delineating wellhead protection areas. It's important to emphasize that the capture zones for the wells are best estimates based on available data, and these zones can be refined, probably made smaller, if additional information was made available. This information is coming out of our wellhead protection plan that was done, I think, in 1998. So some of the information probably could use some updating, but overall it's pretty good. Second page is a map showing the 3 capture zones. The purple one, the closest to the wells, is the 2-year capture zone. Iowa Rural Water is suggesting we leave that at 2-year. The second zone is the middle one, the green one, which is a 10-year capture zone, and there it's called the secondary protection zone, and they're suggesting changing that to a 5-year capture zone. And then the third one in yellow is a 20-year capture zone, and they're suggesting changing that to a 10-year zone. Basically, wellhead protection involves protecting the land area surrounding a well in order to prevent contamination of the groundwater that is likely to be drawn into the well during pumping. Wellhead protection plans are encouraged by the Iowa Department of Natural Resources and the United States EPA. Groundwater usually begins as rain and snow, which falls across the land, then seeps into the ground. And because this water was once at the surface, human activities can affect the quality of the groundwater. And then there's another page with a map, same map that you saw earlier, with just more explanation. Indicates the zones surrounding Hampton's wells, which are being targeted as the wellhead protection area. These are the areas residents need to be especially aware of, because chemical spills or misuse in these zones could affect Hampton's water supply. City residents and rural residents need to be aware of their activities because the shallow aquifer is vulnerable to contamination. So that really is a pretty good explanation of why these zones are in place. It's to protect the water supply, and protect chemicals from seeping down into the aquifers and causing problems with our drinking water that we use to provide citizens.
So if I understand this correctly, like I said, in the very first paragraph says the wellhead protection areas are delineated for 3 different time of travel scenarios, the 2, 10, and 20, right? And so the 2, 10, and 20 are outlined on the map. And then we're looking at changing that to 2, 5, and 10. So therefore,
yeah.
the areas of the map would change?
No, the areas wouldn't, it's just that the years would change, but the area would stay the same, they just change the number of years.
No, so it's the number of years what they track, or what? Because I mean, water probably is not gonna change its speed if I might be misunderstanding, because it says, okay, what time of travel scenario? What's the time of travel then? That it takes for the water to go down into the aquifer? See, because if you're changing, if it's 2, 10, and 20, and you're going to 2, 5, and 10, wouldn't that have, I mean, that has to do.
I think it's a more conservative, they're saying to use a more conservative approach, that let's not assume that if there's a chemicals applied, let's not assume that it would take 10 years, let's assume it would take 5 years in that secondary zone.
Okay.
More conservative, more protective of the wellhead area. And it also.
So
I think it's
what
based
changes
on,
then, besides the 2, 5, and 10 going to that, then what changes then do we need to make, other than we're just redefining the time?
well, in ordinance 350, the other changes was that we would add field cropping, if you recall, in the primary protection zone. I don't think you have a copy of that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the other things, but this information, Jay was asking more information
Right.
on this, so that's kind of why I'm providing it. Now,
So I'm just asking then, so other than adding the cropping and changing it to 2, 5, and 10, what do we do different? What's different then?
Not much. Just the uses, field cropping, and then they said we should specify sewer, residential, and commercial as a permitted use, and above-ground storage tanks when in compliance with state fire marshal regulations. Yeah, that's it. That's what they're recommending we.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I guess I just don't understand what's the difference between 2, 5, and 10 and the 2, 10, and 20 when it really comes down to it, other than the numbers.
Well, I think that since 1998, I think over the years, since 1998, they have gotten more data and more information, and that leads them to believe that it would be better for us to have a 5-year capture zone in the secondary one as opposed
Is
to
that
10.
then, we're monitoring what goes on to that for that period of time?
Well, Iowa Rural Water Association and the DNR and EPA, they are constantly collecting data and monitoring things, but it's not
So we just have
something
to
that they
keep-
specifically
We just have
monitor.
to keep track of that for 2, 5, and 10 rather than 2, 10, and 20, the data.
Well, we don't really track data. It's simply, it's just recommendations on protection areas, and, if you look in chapter.
Because the area didn't change.
Right.
It's the time.
Right.
And I'm just, okay.
And I really don't.
I don't know as I'm answering or asking the question correctly, or I don't think there's really
I think
an
it's-
answer to my question.
I think that since 1998, back then, they recommended what we have, which is the 2, 10, and 20. And their recommendation has changed, probably based on information that they have gained since 1998. And we don't have to change it, we can leave it the same. I wouldn't, the other items, permitted uses, I wouldn't recommend. I think we need to change those and add field
Right,
cropping.
I'm fine with that, I just, but the actual area on that map's not gonna change at all.
No, it doesn't expand or contract, it's just the number.
Okay.
Specified.
And is it safe to say that we're saying that we're deeming that water's going down there faster, so if something were to happen, the water people say, hey, you deemed it to be faster, sir, for some legality or something? I mean, it's just a word change that they're asking us to do, which is saying that we're saturating faster, but we're not changing the zone, so there must be something there for them.
Would that have any impact if there were lawsuits, and like on insurance and so forth? As far as for people that actually own land in that area?
I don't know about that. They're
Just
still,
what's it used for?
they're still able to farm, as long as we add
Right.
field cropping, they're still able to farm and to apply chemicals, according to labeled quantities, so. Yeah, it's a technicality, it's what they're recommending, but we don't have to. we're not required to have a wellhead protection plan. We just, you know, at the time, back in 1998, the council thought it was a good idea to do, and it probably is a good idea to protect your wells. I mean, it is, no question.
Well, this sounds like a thing.
Yeah, they are.
Right, like, we've always done it this way, so we're just gonna change the terms a little bit and keep doing it, even though we don't really know why, but we're doing it that way.
Well,
So
we're doing it
we've always
because,
done it that way, so it must be right.
well, we're doing it that way based on information from our Rural Water Association and the DNR, because they
Okay.
know, we assume they know.
I kind of see it as, I mean, since we've known more since 1998, it's a way to be proactive. Is that kind of how?
Yeah, I think that's what they see it as, yes.
So catch something sooner rather than later to protect us. I don't know if that's kind of.
Well, I think that they're saying that chemicals, if they're applied to the ground, they have information saying that it can get down into the drinking
Okay.
water faster than what they previously believed.
Okay.
And does that do something, say if that we had a major spill in one of these outlying areas, we would know, okay, 5 years, this pink area,
Yeah, if you just
Potentially-
let it sit,
yeah, in 5 years, it's gonna be in our drinking water.
Yes.
We would know, rather than waiting 10 years to worry
Yes.
about it, in 5 years, we could potentially have this in our
That's
drinking
right.
water.
So I
It's
believe
basically
that
what
we're-
it's
we're
come to.
protecting it more by
Right.
saying it'll get.
Cutting it in
faster.
half.
That's right.
Well, if there's a major spill, you would
We
let
should
it
be doing
sit.
something.
You want to
Get
We
it
should
out
be
of
doing
there.
something.
that's right.
So-
But any residual chemicals that
Something's
did
gonna-
get cleaned up would probably end up in your water in 5 years.
Okay, all right.
But we utilize the wellhead protection plan, though, we have the authority or the right, if we do see a farmer nearby, we will stop, and staff will go stop and ask, hey, what are you spreading, and what chemical are you using, and different things of
Right,
that
I'm not
nature.
questioning that at all, I
Yeah.
agree, it's just that time frame that I was just trying to understand
Right,
what significance is it to lower that, and I think you're saying the time to go down into the aquifers is
Right.
half of what they thought.
Yeah. Okay.
That answers my question.
Okay.
We learned a lot.
yeah, they're learning a lot more as time goes on, especially with the nitrates and different things that are used, so.
Thank you. Any more comments on this? If not, we'll go to review ordinance, amending off-street parking regulation. I'll turn it over to
Chief.
the chief of police.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. If you don't remember or recall, the reason why this came to being in the first place was, I think probably even a different council at that time had looked at this issue and had requested that we do something as far as parking on the grass. That is part of the reason why this came to be. As we were looking at it, when somebody had said something about it, and I looked at it and it says that it has to be on surfaced area. What's the definition of surface? Therefore, we went through, got that stuff cleared up, and got it so that we have a definition of surfaced area. It's entirely up to you how you would like me to proceed. The only reason why I was looking at this initially is because of previous council and how they wanted, or what their views were of wanting vehicles that were parked in backyards, what have you, on something different than on the grass. And as if you recall, last fall, I believe it was, we had a citizen in here that was complaining about a neighbor that had a boat, a camper, and whatever else parked in his backyard, and was concerned about what the property looked like at that point in time because of that. So I guess this, what you have in front of you, is what the city attorney has come up with, and addressed some concerns as far as, what about between the alley or street or whatever and the pad, and put that in there, added that in there, as well as, what we had for, wintertime parking. So I guess,
Just for the audience's sake, Bob, I'm just gonna run through and highlight some of this.
sure.
It's to restrict any and all apparatus with axles to include vehicles, trailers, campers, motorhomes, etc., to be parked on residentially zoned properties. They must be parked on a surface pad, minimum 3/4 inch crushed rock, minimum 4 inches thick, or poured concrete to thickness minimum 4 inches or asphalt. So gravel, concrete, or asphalt, 4 inches thick. They have to get a zoning permit. Pads must be constructed in the rear yard with a minimum of 3 feet setbacks from the rear property line and a minimum of 3 feet from the side property line. Reasonable access from the street or alley. Pads must be constructed entirely on private property, must be large enough to accommodate the entire wheelbase of the item which will be parked on it, and it can't protrude onto the adjacent property. That's it in a nutshell. There's some other things, but just to give everybody here an idea of what's being considered.
There was also additions in there as far as items that would not be able to be parked on the pad. I think there was, we got a little bit of feedback the last meeting that we had, some concerns as far as semi-trailers, or farm equipment, or construction equipment, being parked, there, and those are in there, as well as items that would not be able to be parked there. So I guess I'm just looking at, what your thoughts are, or direction.
This doesn't address the person that was in last fall complaining of the several items in their backyard. We still haven't, there's no restriction yet, it's just they're gonna have to pave their entire backyard
Well, they can't do that.
to have,
But that would
So-
restrict that, so whatever items they wanted to have there, they would have X amount of space that they would need to have that gravel, and they could have there, but they would not be able to have
the whole backyard.
numerous things back there.
Okay.
I think Steve's got a rather unique situation, dealing with what's a backyard
Yeah, I
and a
live on a
side
corner
yard
lot,
with the situation in his house.
and there is no alley for rear access, so.
And that is part of the reason why they have, why there is an area in this ordinance that states non-conforming lots, or actually it has non-conforming lots where a pad is not physically applicable to be placed in the rear yard will be reviewed by the Hampton Code Enforcement Officer for approval. Any non-conforming lot may be approved by the Hampton Code Enforcement Officer subject to reasonable stipulations or requirements by said officer. And then H, which has corner lot applications, will be reviewed by the Hampton Code Enforcement Officer for approval. If he doesn't go along with it, you have the appeal process as far as appealing with the Board of Adjustment as well.
Do we have any idea how many households or how many properties will be impacted by this?
I can't tell you for sure. I know there's a lot. And in all areas of town, not necessarily the middle of town, not necessarily Bel Air, southeast part of town.
And have we had a lot of complaints, I guess, compared to how many there are total?
I would say that over like a year's period of time, we probably get 10 to 15 complaints of people being parked on the grass.
And then that's separate property
Separate from
complaints.
basically, yes.
Vehicles being parked on
Yes.
the grass.
Well, we've had it where people have gone and complained about a camper being parked on the grass, or, whatever the case may be.
Bob, do you think if you got two properties that are, just for this purpose, assume that they're exact same properties in two different neighborhoods, and one has a crappy old camper from the 1960s that's parked in the backyard off an alley, and the other one has a brand new camper parked off the alley in the backyard, do you think that you'd get a greater chance of getting a complaint on that
Oh, yeah.
one? Okay, but if we implement something like this, brand new one, old one, it had to abide by this.
And plus those complaints, they're like, if they're on the grass, okay, then they put a pad or gravel, are you still gonna get the complaint? but then the homeowner's just gonna have to pay, but you know what I mean?
But it isn't gonna change the view. If
Yeah.
the neighborhood doesn't like it,
Right,
it's still gonna be.
that's what I mean, so then why even have it?
Well, I don't know, I'm just,
I know I brought a complaint, I think it was last fall, because I had two people stop me in the southwest part of town when I was walking. And I know it was, the house had 5 or 6 cars parked in the front yard and in the backyard. I know that, that is an eyesore. So, but you can't.
But where do you go, so then where do we go and limit how many cars you can have parked in the front yard? I mean,
Yeah,
in Steve's case, he's got maybe 3, 4 cars parked in the driveway, but he's got one that's off on the grass. So, and I mean, basically it's in the front yard because of the fact that that's the front part of his house.
Yeah.
So then the other people that go and park in the front yard we need to be straight across the board with everybody.
Well, that's where Steve raised a good point. I mean, it's like opening a can of worms.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if you want me at the podium, but I was sharing with Dick ahead of this, and I guess I mentioned to you, Diane, a previous community I lived in, had an issue where they hadn't been maintaining sidewalks, and they started enforcing their written ordinance that they'd ignored, and had a huge outcry. Big majority of the town had to redo their sidewalks the way the code was written, and they actually ended up delaying it twice, I think 2 different years, because the contractors couldn't keep up. So, I mean, I would just be aware of that too, if you suddenly, want everybody in town to be pouring concrete.
And we,
Or rock.
right,
Be prepared that there might be a whole lot of concrete work going on. And then, the other situation can come up, if people can't have it there, then they need to store it somewhere else. And a lot of communities that have done it, suddenly there isn't storage space in the community to accommodate all the.
go ahead and see your comment.
I've been by Steve's house and I don't see a big problem, but drive down South Federal, there's 2 campers and a Suburban sitting in the middle of an empty lot. Doesn't the rental housing code say something that the landlord has to furnish off-street parking? We've got houses where there's 6, 7, 8 cars parked, different counties, different states, and part of the reason is the snow removal ordinance. But still, if you have 4 different, 5, 6, 7, 8 different people living in a house and they're not related, that's another issue. We got the trash issue.
Well, let's stay on thoughts here.
No, I was
Yeah.
wondering about the rental housing inspection, that's a parking issue. Does a rental house have to, have off-street parking?
Doug, do you want to comment on that?
I don't think there's anything regarding the parking in the rental code necessarily, but there's a parking code that we do have, for depending on if you have a duplex, a triplex, or something of that nature. That's part of why we have the zoning in place and stuff, and, I know the lot that actually Barry's talking about, cause I've been down there and looked at that, but I don't know that we necessarily have a law that states that if someone owns an empty lot, they can't park a vehicle on it.
Boy, within reason,
Well,
why are they sitting in the middle of the lot? I mean, if you wanna attract businesses to this town, let's clean it up.
Well,
then you create law.
yeah, that's
Then we
what we're
just
trying to
create-
do,
that's what we're
but
trying to
that's
do,
what
is
we're
to
trying to do, is
create
put an
some law
ordinance
to-
in.
right.
But the ordinance
Well,
is going to
it's,
go
you know,
double cut.
one bad apple's gonna ruin the whole thing.
Well, here's the thing, and I don't know, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll use the example Ron gave. You got one nice looking, well-maintained 1960s camper, and then you got one that's just sitting there, it's a piece of junk, no one's gonna use it. You and I might think it's a piece of junk, but the property owner, that's their pride and joy, so so when you go to court, you gotta be able to have all these ducks in a row. However, if it does become to where that one is it's parked in a lot, and it's devaluing the property next to it, then it becomes a nuisance. So then I think you switch over and use nuisance code to appreciate that type of complaint, you know, or to work with. Not necessarily a parking law. Same way with, the people that track up in the fall and the spring that leave the big muddy ruts, in the yard, also the whole yard start to look like crap because they're parking and leaving the vehicles up there when the frost is first out. I think that becomes nuisance, because that appearance then devalues the property next to you.
So you're thinking that, I'm just,
And I'm just throwing that out there as an example, but.
Dick, you thoughts on this?
I had a question for Steve, but I would have changed the flow.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Your concern at this point is not a summertime, like, summertime parking on the yard, it's a wintertime issue of having to get your car back off the street without, that extra car back off the street without getting a ticket.
Well, it's twofold, I guess. That's good.
And the
My car,
camper-
my
and
car
the
issue,
camper
the
side.
camper's a separate
Right.
issue, because it's in my yard all year.
But the way that this
And I
is
just
written-
don't know, I mean, I don't know if my neighbors have complained, I guess, so.
Not that I'm aware of.
But it's, I mean, I probably have a unique yard, because to me, it's my backyard, but I'm on a corner lot, so,
Mhm.
I mean, and my parking isn't in the front of my house either, it's, my address faces west, my parking is on the south, and my yard is, my backyard is east, and that's where I park my camper. I mean, if you come down the street, the whole thing looks like my yard, you know, I can't say it's my backyard, because it's very visible that I've got a camper sitting there.
So the points is what Barry was talking about. I mean, to me, the devaluation, we put something in code, there is something already in code, but it's clarifying, and we're trying to clarify the code by going either deeper, but realizing the more deeper we go, it's going to affect people.
Yes.
The only thing I would say is there is something in here about gravel as compared to concrete, so you can pour gravel into it. More thoughts,
Is there,
comments?
is there anything, we have an old camper you're speaking of, if they aren't licensing
Yeah.
it, that we can,
That's not an issue. I mean, if they're not currently licensed, then yes.
okay,
Something
so
to
there
be
is
done
something
about.
to.
So if
But
the
they-
trailer or
but
anything
if they-
parked there.
But if they have them currently licensed, the tires are pumped up, whatever, then.
So they're probably using
And
it
the
then.
ones, the complaint that we had about the ones in the backyard, part of it was because it'd been there since it snowed, and there was actually, it was stuck in the ice. Well,
Okay, but yet it was still, when the ice would thawed, it could be moved.
Right.
And then within that, do we have procedures on it that if they left it without moving it for a year or something, that'd be an abandon, even though it's still licensed?
30 days.
It's 30 days, needs to be moved every 30 days?
yeah, I believe that is correct, yes.
Okay.
But, I'm sorry, we have a lot to do, and for us to go around to check properties to see if they've been parked there longer than 30 days, unless they have flat tires, I understand us
Right,
needing
but-
to see that. But checking to see, I mean, it's hard enough to go and make sure there's a car parked on the street that's getting moved every 24 hours or whatever it is, let alone vehicles that are parked in driveways and backyards or whatever.
More comments? Anybody have more comments on this? Because I guess I have questions on it. Bob, what is it you want? I mean, we want to enforce it. And the
I
part I
just
look
want-
at is go, if it's on gravel and the tires are flat, is this going to be able to enforce?
Yes, because that goes under the nuisance violation.
Under the nuisance violation. So, putting this in here, let's definition about, okay, at least you have a parking lot and it's defined as a parking lot. So now you've defined the code more. Now, within that, I guess Mr. Hansen's going to have a problem because his mobile home is now in violation, and you need to now pull for gravel or concrete, if that's what's going to happen. So that's the catch-22, which is like the sidewalk or anything else. Now, has it brought down your property and those type of things? We don't know, but your neighbor could say that.
One of the things that that I had realized when we started doing this, it wasn't like we were gonna go and enact this, and people had 30 days to go and put gravel in there.
Right.
I know that this is gonna be a process. My thought is by the time the winter comes around, that it would be done by then. Because I don't expect anybody to go and, when you haven't had to have something and all of a sudden, you've gotta come up with either concrete in or gravel in, and maybe it'll take longer than that. But again, I'm pretty fair, and as long as you can see somebody making progress. So, but I wanna do whatever the council wants, because this originally came up because of an issue that was brought up as far as vehicles being parked in the backyards and things like that.
And Doug, from your perspective, they weren't nuisance, so you couldn't go after a nuisance. It was just a bunch of vehicles in someone's backyard that used as a parking lot.
Vehicles, boats, campers. I've had complaints most recently, a couple, farm implements. That's obviously a violation of code, so we were able to get those moved fairly quickly.
They're back
Are they really? So, and we can,
There's a farm implement
Is that by
on
the
Highway
yard
3
exhibit?
that's a yard decoration.
and I had one down in the
Oh, it's-
southeast, and that was removed, but, now that those other two are back, I appreciate the heads up. And that's more of a problem than, that's probably one of our biggest problems in town, is people that will, antagonize and make work for staff, just out of spite, and we all know who this one is, so it doesn't surprise me, and I can explain later.
Okay.
I guess, in that, as long as we're talking about farm implements, Steve has a camper, I'm just using you as an example, Steve, okay?
Yeah.
Steve has a camper parked next to his house, it's on grass. Well, there are different people from around town that have tractors that they've gone and restored or drive around that they park in their driveway. Technically speaking, we should be going and telling them they need to go and get them out because it's a violation of, city's ordinance. Where do you draw the line?
So, and I'm just, this is like overwhelming for me, but we are protected, because I understand the people that call and complain, and somebody's got, let's say, 4 cars in their yard, whether it's the front or back. We are covered if that car isn't licensed, the tires are flat, that goes under the nuisance.
Correct.
So if there's a complaint, we're covered, if those things fall in place.
That's the complaint, yeah.
Yeah, if that's.
And we're aware, there's some people that'll just go and license them, thinking that they're gonna get by doing that.
Mhm.
Those are ones that we do check, okay, is it being moved? Or, whatever, so that you don't run into that. But I'm just talking about the person that might have one vehicle in their driveway that, happens to sit there for more than 30 days. Yeah.
I just,
That's
after
pretty tough.
after discussing this, I mean, just to make your lives a little more simple, I just think we're okay with the way we are. That's just my opinion.
And this is all, what we're trying to do is dealing with parking lots. Is that not, I'm not trying to summarize, but it is, if you're parking it in the grass as a parking, this is what this is spawning out of.
Yes.
One of our biggest issues in Hampton, and it's not just Hampton, I don't think that deals with this, and I think a lot of communities of the same age as ours, and some of the bigger cities that have, some of the construction of their homes, when you constructed a home back in the 60s and 50s, most people only had one vehicle. So you have a single stall garage and a single stall driveway, many, and now the houses are built close enough back then to where, they're very, very tight. But now we come into the issues where if you have kids and you got all these people driving and stuff, it doesn't conform to modern zoning, basically, is what it boils down to. It's tough to come up with something that's gonna fit everybody.
So what is the council thinking on, how do we get the information out, realizing it's a double-edged sword? We're trying to clean up, something that's on the books. So where do we go with it?
I think one of the complaints that I've heard the most that makes sense is, non-wintertime parking of motor vehicles on the yards. Couldn't we address that in some way to at least eliminate that being an aggravation? I mean, licensed operable vehicles? What does our code say about that right now?
You wanna say that again? I'm not sure,
Operating, the example that you gave, of a rental property that has multiple drivers and they're using the yard as a parking lot in the summertime. Not just to get off the street on a temporary basis, but in the summertime, because that's happened in some places, correct?
Okay, then my question would be, is, and I'm not talking, and I know you're talking rental, but again, I'm gonna use Steve as an example. He parks his camper next to his garage or whatever in his backyard, but it's on the grass, and it's there all year long.
And it's
So
a
how do we
vehicle.
differentiate
It's a motor
between?
vehicle, it's not a pool type.
Right.
Full time,
Oh, you're,
It's a
okay,
trailer.
okay.
travel.
But, okay, so that's trailer, so let's say you have a motorized camper then. I mean, that wouldn't be any different than the vehicles that are parked on that, like on the empty lot.
Yeah, that's the distinction I was looking for, was if it's motorized, let's not be having them parked on the grass in the summertime. And I'm not sure we're going the right direction with this 24-hour rule to get it off the street to avoid, I don't know about that, I'm just saying some of the summertime clutter that we're seeing, taking a bite of this sour apple that we're having to deal with and trying to at least solve that part of it. Does that make
But so you're kind of going to clarifying, let's restrict the vehicles, motorhomes, cars, anything that has a motor on it, from parking in, and then putting just kind of halfway here saying, okay, we're talking about motorized vehicles must be parked on gravel, or which one of your family members would have that problem during the summer, because you're saying you're parking one off the driveway.
That was just for snow removal reasons, otherwise I'd park in the street.
Right. So,
But if you don't do something about the people parking in the middle of the lot, you guys are elected to do something about, let's keep Hampton clean. You're not doing anything about it.
but the code that we're talking about right there, that would alleviate that.
Wouldn't that help with that problem, what I'm suggesting?
They've got a camper sitting there too, don't they, along with the two cars? I think, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's
is
got
two
alley
other
access,
campers.
they could park it to the rear of the lot. Why park it in the middle?
Well, under this code, if what you're suggesting, Dick, the two cars would have to be on the street or on a slab or a gravel. So that's what you're throwing out there, kind of a halfway, which would
The
result
bad
in.
thing about gravel is, you'd have to refresh your gravel every year. The grass is getting, or use Roundup, it just gradually sinks in the ground and grass takes over.
Other comments on the council, because we just need an action item to how to bring it forward for action.
I don't like your idea of a motorhome as opposed to a camper. Because the person that's got a camper and then they see the guy with a motorhome, has to force him in, and he doesn't, you're gonna create a lot of conflict there. I know where you're going with it, but I can just see that one's, you're gonna get somebody mad on that.
I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, I'm just, I just know for me, I don't know that anybody's complained. Maybe a new neighbor would, and maybe I should take care of it. I'm just warning you, whatever you do, you might have a can of worms coming at you.
Oh, yes, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
what.
it's a
we do.
catch-22, and the biggest thing is, I think, from a lot of our perspective, is we need to protect our property values, we need to protect our neighborhoods, and we need to have something in there that has some bite that we can enforce, but within that, there is some collateral damage, just your comment of the sidewalk. Hey, you know, that community, it's got brand-new sidewalks now.
Yep.
So, you know, it took a couple years to get it done, those type of things. We have a problem here, we're trying to deal with it. The question is this the right way of dealing with it? What are the holes in it? And I guess from the press or anything else that's in here, I mean, there's, you know, you came out to speak to it, we've had speaking to this topic, I mean, where, and in other communities, is there something that we're missing from other communities? Because all the communities I've lived in the past, it's always been the same thing. RVs, you have to park it on, you know, you have to have gravel or concrete to park it on. And I understand the gravel issue, after a year, it's gonna go, but at least that's interpretation, that the code, you know, we can enforce the code if you can't see the gravel 4 inches deep and it's grown up, and then it's no longer gravel. But we are looking for direction. We had Bob present to us, the chief presented us last time. We had him make some changes to it. Now you brought it back with changes. We understand some of the things that are going to happen. Is this the best? And I guess from both the code enforcement, Doug, enforcing and also putting together, it's making you going out to get the license, because they have to apply for that.
It's a tough question.
And yeah.
This is talking about axled vehicles, not motorized vehicles. All
Correct.
apparatus with axles to include vehicles, trailers, campers, motorhomes. I mean, this then would mean that somebody who has a small trailer that they pull behind their lawnmower is also subject.
If it's licensed. If it's not licensed, then you can
What
deal
about
with it
the
on that.
unlicensed? I mean, that,
Doesn't say license.
But I thought that was under code enforcement.
Yeah.
Those all would be included.
does snowmobile
Yeah,
trailer
they have to be
require a
licensed,
license?
right?
Yes.
But through the state law,
Yeah.
right. So if it's unlicensed, then we can deal with it, if there's not a license with it. But if it has a license on it, this is where this is dealing.
There's a lot of other circumstances that can go along that way. I think we could take another look at too. As far as that person that's, has an old vehicle, it's licensed, it's there, but it's, okay, not operable, I get that. But, someone has a vehicle in their backyard and they just leave it there and it sits there for time on end compared to someone that's, it's tough. I don't know how to define. See, what the hardest part for us is to define and distinguish between junk vehicle, licensed, a license. There's some vehicles out on the road that people would consider
Yeah,
junk.
but that's not our issue. If it's licensed,
Understood.
if it's
Yeah.
not licensed, we can deal with code enforcement, right?
Right.
If it's not licensed, we can deal with it
Right.
under a nuisance issue. But if it's licensed and it's parked in their grass, this is what this is for. So, I guess that's the question is it been in the paper enough? Has everybody talked about it enough to kind of know how we do it? If we're gonna bring something like this up in front of city council, which is what we are, but to take action upon it, is it the best wording that we want? And enforceable. And considered other communities to kind of other communities, because we aren't the only ones.
We've looked at some.
There's no magic
There
ordinance,
isn't.
this is difficult.
I wish there was.
There's no perfect way of doing it. Every community struggles with this, and no matter what you do, you're gonna have unpleased people. Right now, you have some unpleased people that are tired of looking at some of these things. And if you change it and enforce it, you're gonna have a different group upset. So, there's either way, but that's just the reality.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, some of the eyesores are gonna remain even if there's a path or gravel.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the exception that they won't be able to park 5 vehicles in that area.
That's
You're only
true.
gonna be able to
It's a
put
limit.
so many
There'll be a
there.
limit.
And then from that point on, we have something that we can go and do something about if you have those other 4 vehicles there or whatever.
And is that because there's code on the book that you can't cover up so much of your lot?
Right.
Is that?
I don't
There's
know,
some zoning.
that's with structures.
That is the structure.
That's not with
No, there's.
concrete.
No, not concrete, in the zoning book there is, in the back of one of, can't remember which one, on how much the yard can be grass or what have you.
I think you can't have more than 30% of your backyard in structures, isn't it? I don't know that we need to look
Right.
into it.
Yeah, that might be something that needs to be defined a little better.
Yeah, I was thinking it was.
It's structures.
I think it's structure.
So, yeah, that would need to be defined right off the bat, because there's an exception to that one, because if I just put gravel in my whole backyard, I can just put as many cars as I can put in there.
I would recommend that you try to seek input from the public as best that you can, because it's, talk to people, and hopefully a newspaper article will spur some conversation, and we can look into
The zoning.
maximum a person could pave or put gravel in their backyard. And get back
Cause
to
flat
that.
work, we'd love people to go, up to a property line, there's no setback